Okay, year 11, we're ready to have a go at the reading questions now. So you've got the text all boxed off from the previous video, and you've identified some of the quotations that you want to use in the text, linking them to the questions now that you know what they're going to be asking you on. So question 1, read again the first part of the source from lines 1 to 5. List 4 things about the bird in Alex's nightmare from this part of the source. Remember, explicit information only. You're not being asked to read between the lines and make any sort of inference here. You do not have to use your own words, but it makes sense to use full sentences. If you think back to the examples that I showed you from the mock paper, sometimes people didn't get the mark because they used it without saying what it was, or they didn't include enough detail. Make sure that your facts answer the questions. If it's not about the bird from Alex's nightmare, don't include it. If it's about Alex, if it's about any other aspect of the nightmare, it must be about the bird. Make sure you only include details from the lines given, so 1 to 5 in this case. If you find something brilliant in line 7, tough, you won't get marks for it. Make sure you don't repeat yourself, and remember that tip that I told you from the mock as well. There isn't a loophole where if you just copy down lines 1 to 5 you'll get 4 marks. They won't give you anything for that, so don't do it. Okay, so as soon as you're ready, pause the video, answer the question, and then come back and press play again. Okay, question 2. As you know, it's the 8-mark question about how does the writer use language, and in this case it's how does the writer use language here to describe the effects of the storm, and it's the extract from lines 6 to 11. If you remember from the mock feedback, one of the things that you needed to do was to include really explicit writer's methods. So there's a collection of those around the page that might be useful to you, but also think about the connotations of some of the vocabulary that's used, or semantic fields that might be used, and identify some key quotations, 2 or 3, that show really effectively how language is being used to describe the effects of that storm. Remember the feedback from the examiner's report. The question focuses on the effects of the storm here. The best answers referred explicitly to that focus. Some of the answers in the mock were excellent, but only used 1 quotation, which limited their mark as they didn't have a range. So that's why I said pick out 2 or 3 quotations. Remember not to just throw that word language around really generically. You need to select methods and talk about specific methods. So that's what that previous slide had around the edge for you. And some of the answers explored the connotations of language without considering the context of the whole text. Whilst the question focuses on the extract, the impact of the writer's choices on the reader go beyond this and should be acknowledged in the most perceptive answers. Now, I suppose what would be relevant in this question to that would be, whilst this extract is very much about the storm, remember that this is a character who is traumatised and who is unsettled, and that is because of his worry about his mum's illness. So whilst there is a literal storm hammering his windows outside, he is also experiencing a bit of an internal storm. So you can talk about how this storm is a metaphor for what's going on in his dream as well, and how that links to the bigger dilemma, the bigger difficult situation that he's in. So that's what we mean by, yes, focus on this extract and make sure you talk exclusively about quotations in this extract, but you can bring in your knowledge from the rest of the text there as well to show that really perceptive understanding of what the writer is trying to do. Now, on the screen that you've got here, you've got the extract. It looks slightly different, but that's just because the font's different, because we've taken it from the exam paper. What I'd like you to do is to have a look through and identify the choices that you want to make. So we've highlighted some of them for you. So things like lashing and roaring and spilling and pounding, those dynamic verbs, the way that the waves have been personified and described as furious, that idea of the alliteration with the rain on the rooftop. You've got a semantic field of the weather there with wind and rain and thunder. So you've got lots of things that you can talk about. Remember, this is a what, how, why paragraph that you're doing, and you need to be doing 2 of them really to show that range and that depth. So you would spend around 10 minutes answering this question. So you're going to need to pause the video while you go and have a go at that question. Okay, come back and press play when you've finished. So question 3, if you remember year 11, is where you're asked, how does the writer structure the text to interest the reader? It's an 8-mark question, and let's just have a quick reminder of what you're being asked to do. So you need to think about the whole of the source. So remember, this isn't about an extract. This is about the whole of the text that you've been given. It reminds you that the text has been taken from the beginning of a novel, and you've been asked, how is the text structured to interest you as the reader? So there's 2 parts to that. There's the how part, how has it been actually pieced together, and then why does it interest you? The little bullet points you could write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning, how and why the writer changes the focus as the source develops, and any other structural features that interest you. That's a reminder that you need to look at something from the start, something from the middle, and something from the end. The little examiner's report from the mock exams, just a reminder before you go into having a go at this one, what those successful qualities of responses were and what answers needed to do in order to score more highly. The best answers used the narrative triangle to inform their analysis, and that was done brilliantly. So please do that again. Don't let that be a one-off. Remember that this question covers the whole text, so it's important that you do include the beginning, the middle, and the end in your analysis. The question focuses on structure, so it is not relevant to refer to language here. Even if you make a beautiful point about language, you won't get the marks for it if it's not about structure. Remember, in the mocks, lots of you talked about how the text was structured, and using that narrative triangle, you were really impressive there, but you didn't fully explain why it was interesting or why it was effective. Think about how it's effective, how the reader is being positioned, rather than whether or not you find it interesting. Some answers from the mock were limited by the depth of that why, so really think of these phrases as banned, these empty phrases like it makes the reader read on, it'll interest the reader will be intrigued. Instead, tell me, so what is it that's going to make me want to read on? What is it that I as a reader am going to want to know? What questions will I have? What will I need to know? What will it make me think? How am I being positioned to respond is the question you should be thinking about there. So if you use your narrative triangle and if you map the text onto this, think about what's in the exposition, what setting or character is being introduced here. So you know from the City of the Beasts text that it's Alex's nightmare. So that's what the exposition is. So think about what atmosphere that creates and how we're being positioned to perceive, I suppose, the environment that Alex is living in, the storm, that feeling of just unrest and being unsettled. It's not a calm start to the story. Look for the rise in action. Try and identify 2 points from here. So where's the build-up of events? And then what is that climax? What is that climactic point in the text? Remember, for the fall in action and the denouement, that kind of the unravelling of the conflict and then that resolution, that catharsis, you are unlikely to see that in your exam text. So don't worry too much about that bit. But look for, in the City of the Beast text, the exposition, a couple of examples of rise in action and the climax. What is it building up to? There are some useful phrases on the screen there that might help you. And you saw these in the examiner's feedback on those highlighted examples from the mocks, that they gave credit for things like at first, then, but show that you know that narrative triangle. So talk about how in the exposition that introduce the rise in action, that the writer shifts the focus to, the writer builds towards the climax. Really show off that you know those structural techniques and how this then positions the reader. Okay, now you should be spending around 10 minutes on this question, so pause the video, have a go at doing the response, and then come back when you're ready to have a go at question 4. Okay, year 11, you're on the home straight now. Question 4, it's the 20 marker, but if you remember, this is the one in paper 1, it asks you to what extent you agree with a statement. In this case, it's asking you to look at lines 16 until the end. And the statement says that a student said, this part of the story set during breakfast time shows that Alex is struggling to cope with his mother's illness. To what extent do you agree? So in your response, you could consider your own impressions of Alex, evaluate how, so that's your prompt that you're looking for writer's methods, evaluate how the writer shows that Alex is struggling to cope, and support your response with references to the text. The focus of this question then is about how Alex is struggling to cope with his mother's illness and how the writer conveys that. You're looking to be writing what, how, why paragraphs, making sure that you link to the statement in the what. So Allende conveys how Alex is struggling to cope, or Allende shows that Alex finds it particularly difficult that. And you should really be aiming to do about 3 of those. Because it is a 20-mark question, you need to make sure you leave enough time for yourself to do this question, so you are looking at 25 minutes here. Remember from the mock exams, the little examiner's report, answers need to address the focus of the statement. So in the mock, it was Zoe's reaction times and the sense of danger. In this one, it's about Alex struggling to cope with his mother's illness. So that should be the central idea behind all of your answers. Some answers focused on your opinion rather than how the writer had crafted the piece. This meant that some responses were personal rather than evaluative. Now, in the mock, that meant you were all really unsympathetic towards Zoe in the avalanche and how she should have seen it sooner. In this one, I suppose it's if you took it from the point of view of, oh, Alex is really struggling. I can understand why he would struggle. That would be really difficult, without actually engaging with the text and how the writer shows that. And that links to this point that you are expected to evaluate the writer's methods as part of the what, how, why. So it's how is the writer showing that he's struggling to cope when you're looking at that text. So you need to have another look at line 16 until the end. Hopefully when you did your reading earlier on, you identified some quotations that really show that. The way he talks about his mother as a ghost, the idea that he's almost grieving for her, even though she's still there. There's lots of examples of how you can look at this, the way that he snaps at his sisters, and all of those are signals that Alex is struggling to cope. So there's a lot for you to go on here. There's some useful sentence starters on the screen there, so that you are using evaluative words. So things like the writer successfully depicts how Alex is struggling. The writer effectively conveys Alex's struggle. The use of a semantic field of death works well because it shows that Alex considers, talk about his mother's illness. The writer deliberately or purposefully chose to use. The use of a particular method has a great impact because. So you could use those. So it might be useful that when you're doing your answer that you have this video paused on this screen, or that you access this in the PowerPoint that's on Firefly as well. Okay, so you're looking for 3 what, how, why paragraphs, all linked to the statement, and you should be spending around 25 minutes on this task. Okay, so off you go. Pause your video when you're ready. Right, well done Year 11. You've now completed your mock feedback and you've applied those skills to a new exam paper. Now that you've done your set of responses for the City of the Beasts Walking Talking mock, if you have a look at the bottom of the Firefly task page, the mark scheme from the exam board is there. And just like we had those sample responses for the Silent Land paper from your mock, those example answers are there in that mark scheme as well. So you might find it useful to have a look at those and be able to see the kind of things that you could have put to get different levels of response. So have a little look at that as well. But well done Year 11.